Hey, good morning, everyone. I know we're just kicking off this webinar. Thanks to Ego and the gang for providing the expertise to help us understand maximizing uptime. Choosing a charging system is key to landscape professionals with the electrification. Ego's got some good solutions, and we're going to learn about those today. My name is Glenn Hansen. I'm the editor of OPE Plus. I'm going to introduce our crew and let them kick off this webinar. I'm kind of taking my time. I'm kind of easing into this because I want to make sure that a couple of latecomers will have time to hear all this information, but we'll make our introductions and then we'll let the team take over. Again, thanks for joining us. First of all, I want to introduce Nick Feld. Nick is the Senior Product Manager for Outdoor Power Equipment for Chevron North America. Nick really led the launch of Ego's PGX commercial charging system. Before joining this company, Nick held key roles in product management and sales with industry leaders such as Bosch and Werner and Medline. He's got deep background in developing industry-leading products and commercialization strategies, and he continues to drive significant advancements in outdoor power equipment. And when he's not working, Nick lives in the Chicago area and he enjoys woodworking and exercise, but most of all, competing with his identical twin brother to achieve the most perfectly striped lawn. Nick, great to have you here. Also want to introduce Amner De Leon. He is the founder and owner of a commercial landscape company called Blue Sky Green Earth. I love that name, and I look forward to learning more about that. Amner has a diverse background in both service and retail sectors, and that's helped him gain success as a landscape business owner. He has served as a district manager for a couple dozen H&R Block locations, where he honed his skills in operational leadership and client management. And he has managed more than $50 million in revenue as a district manager in retail for Radio Shack. Lastly, I want to introduce Barnaby, and he started talking at age 2, and he hasn't stopped since. He is really fun, and we're glad to have him here. He made a career in radio in Southern California across various genres, from Top 40 to NPR. Worked in television news and specialized in live reporting on topics like gang violence in Las Vegas and chasing tornadoes in Oklahoma. Wow. Barnaby's passion for tools led him to host a tool review website called Tool Select. He produced more than 800 videos in just 18 months. His expertise caught the attention of Chevron, the parent company of Ego Commercial, and they brought him on board as, my favorite title in the industry, Director of Excitement. With 10 years of experience, Barnaby now educates consumers and pro users, bringing energy, insight, and humor to every discussion. We've got a great crew. We've got a lot to get to, so I'm going to turn it over, and we're going to kick off this webinar on maximizing uptime.
Thanks a lot, Glenn. So, class, first of all, thanks first and foremost for grabbing a seat and kind of quenching your thirst for knowledge about battery, because it is a big transition that's happening right before our very eyes. And so everybody's got a lot of questions about which system is going to be right for them. So in the course of this webinar, what we're going to be doing is sharing with you how Ego's PGX commercial charging system is, in our minds, the answer on how your crews can get through their days using battery instead of gas. And there are a number of battery platforms to choose from. So we're going to lean heavily on Nick Feld, who's a senior product manager for Ego Commercial, to help make us a sound decision process laid out in front of us so we can figure out which line is best for you. Also, in what will be probably the jaw-dropping moment of the presentation, we're going to hear from Amner De Leon of Blue Sky Green Earth Landscaping about his experience offering battery-powered only lawn care, and it has exceeded, and I mean really far exceeded, his wildest dreams as far as number of clients wait until you hear what he has to tell you about this. Also, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of how to begin making the transition to battery power, and we are going to be answering your questions. So in the right side of the box there, you're going to have a place where you can put your questions in that we will answer at the end of the presentation. So as the fight announcer always says at the big heavyweight battles, let's get ready to rumble and get down to why battery is such a smart choice for you right now, not the future, but right now. So let's kick it off with Professor Feld. He's going to start us off with a survey to kind of gauge your take on battery power. Take it away, Nick.
Thank you, Barney, and also thanks, Glenn, and the good folks at OPE Plus for hosting us this morning. Hope everybody's doing well. Thanks, everybody, for joining. So, Barney, we will start in just a moment. We're going to cover some basics that we think that many professional landscapers could really benefit from as they start to, process their transition from gas to battery. And we will start with a quick poll question in just a second. But real quick, regardless of the role that our attendees, play in the professional landscaping community, there is one thing that everybody can agree on, and that is time is money, right? Maximizing uptime. And that's super critical, right? Because time is money. And so the more important things that we are going to really keep in mind as we walk through how to navigating the waters of transitioning from gas to battery. So let's continue. So first poll question, to get a little bit better understanding of the audience, we'd really like to know what you all feel like best describes your specific interest in outdoor power equipment. So for example, do you have local or even state law ordinances that are forcing you in this direction? Perhaps your customers are asking for battery products to be used because they can be more quiet than their gas powered equivalents. Or maybe you feel that there are certain workflow efficiencies to be gained by using battery products. So with that, take a few moments, think about your answer, be sure to hit the submit button. That's really important. See the responses rolling in here. Okay. So it looks like we've got an overwhelming response of, let me put that back up. There we go. I think cordless could make my business more efficient. No surprise. I think in this day and age, everybody's looking to maximize uptime. The question is how, right? And especially with battery, there's a lot of questions that lead into that. How do you maximize your battery offering? How do you maximize your charging system to be able to do that? So workflow efficiencies are undoubtedly one of the most important things that landscapers will kind of take to heart in this process. As we think about, leaning into that, and we think about the commercial landscaping community, being constrained by gas, there are some industry insights that we've gained over the last several years. First and foremost, every landscaper is different, right? Every process, every workflow, every crew size, every business situation. There is no one size fits all crew solution. Consequently, up until very recently, there was no technical solution, or I should say there was no one size fits all technical solution that would allow landscapers to seamlessly transition from gas to battery. Downtime being one of the greatest concerns for commercial users, the last thing that anybody wants to experience is equipment downtime, right? Things breaking down in the field, or tools not working properly, tools not working long enough, right? A lot of things come to mind. One of the biggest concerns of that landscapers have is the overall cost, right? There's that initial sticker shock that can really weigh very heavily on the business owners' minds. They don't want to pay any more than what they've already invested in, and especially if you're thinking about transitioning completely from gas to battery, that's a big, costly decision. So, introducing the brand new Ego Commercial PGX charging system. What our system does is quite literally enables you to charge overnight, It allows you to charge on board, whether it's your vehicle or your trailer. And it even allows you to charge off grid. So if your specific needs require you to have intraday charging, we've got a solution for you. So let's take a look at a little bit more of what that means. So with the PGX system, what does it entail? What does it encompass? Well, first and foremost, we've got the PGX hub. That is the main charging unit, is the brains of the operation. I'll talk about that more in a second. We also have what we call our 3-port dock. That is the mechanism that allows you to actually add as many batteries or charge as many batteries as you want. And whether you're a small landscaper or a large landscaper with few batteries or a lot of batteries, it allows you to scale. And then last but not least, our PGX Power Bank is the intraday charging solution. So when you're out and about in the field, if you don't have access to grid power, if you don't have extension cords, and if you just want to be able to charge batteries in your truck, in your trailer, without all the above, this is the solution that lets it be possible. So a little bit more on each of those. So it all starts with our PGX hub. Again, this is the brains of the operation. It's designed to run off a single 15 amp circuit. So you do not need to invest in costly infrastructure upgrades. You don't need to call a union electrician to come out and spend time fiddling with your panel box, adding cables and conduit and things like that. 15 amp circle, simple. You can mount this in a building. You can mount this in a van, in the back of a truck, or even in a trailer. It's IoT enabled. What does that mean? That means that when you're fully connected to the system, we actually have an Ego commercial fleet app that will enable you to monitor your charging remotely through a mobile app device. And so that's really important, because when you talk about understanding workflow efficiencies, you'll be able to see not only how your batteries are charging, when they're charging, but you can even schedule your charging, right? So think about how there are key times of the day at night, for example, when electricity costs are down. You're going to want to maybe schedule your charging to happen when that electrical cost per hour comes down, so you can save money. So ultimately, because it starts with the hub, the PGX system is very simple. It's the only charger you'll need. From there, the PGX system is scalable. So the PGX 3-port dock connects to the power hub, and it's able to connect 3 batteries and charge 3 batteries at the same time. So again, whether you're a small landscaper managing just a few batteries, or you're a large landscaper managing lots of batteries, this is how our system lets you scale to fit your needs. So with that in mind, what can you do, right? What's the maximum? So one of the claims we make is being able to charge up to 70 batteries overnight. Or if you're a little bit more technically minded, it means that you can charge up to 15 kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours, we'll talk about that in a few moments, but the long story short is we're going to show you guys how basic understanding of volts and amp hours isn't enough information these days. You need to understand energy, because energy is what gets the job done. So the more energy you have, the better you need to understand how you're going to be able to charge that energy. So when we talk about 15 kilowatt hours of energy, you're going to find out before the end of the presentation how we calculate that and what that means for you. Last but not least, some professional landscapers need to be able to charge during the day, like I mentioned. Oftentimes this is because they are limited for space as it relates to additional batteries in their vehicle or on their trailer, or maybe they simply don't want to make the investment of buying those batteries, right? So to solve for that, we've got this PGX Power Bank. The solution is enabled by our brand new high capacity battery. It's a 2.2 kilowatt hour battery, which basically plugs into the power bank, and then it connects to the power hub for being able to charge. So once it's fully charged, you can disconnect from the system. You can then go and put on your truck, on your trailer, and then you can literally use it to recharge your handheld batteries throughout the day. No cables, no special connections. It's completely portable. You might ask, what is 2.2 kilowatt hours? Well, in basic terms, to equate it to what you might be more accustomed to hearing, it's the same as 40 amp hours. So what that means is you get up to 40 amp hours of rechargeable energy for your Ego Power Plus batteries. So as an example, that means you could recharge up to, say, for 8 of our 5 amp hour battery. And you can do that in just 30 minutes. So pretty fast charge time as well. So this piece is truly a remarkable part of our entire system for the Ego commercial charging capability.
So Nick, on that power bank, I think what I've heard is that you can charge batteries in the field quicker than you can discharge them on a tool. Is that true?
So that's an important point you make, Barnaby, because you're right. You know, if a landscaper is able to use up a battery in a faster period of time than they're able to charge it, that doesn't do them a ton of good. So if you are instead able to charge a battery that is ready to go before you exhaust the current battery, that means that quite literally when you're done with your existing battery, you can just go swap it and you're ready to go. So it's not completely all about the fastest charge speeds, but if we can manage expectations as it relates to how long a battery will last, and then certainly how given an application, and then making sure that that to be able to recharge that battery is less than the time to use it, we're in good shape, and so is the professional landscaper.
Yep. Awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about battery power as a new fuel source, because when we talk about batteries, that's quite literally what you're doing. You're basically having to think about it as a new fuel source, right? In the previous era, you would go out and buy gas, right? And in some cases, if you've got 2-part or 4-part, equipment, you've got to add oil and mix it and things like that. So when you invest in a battery system, you're actually investing in a new fuel source, and you're paying for that up front. But before we get into all that, we think it would be really helpful to actually cover a few basics as it relates to the technical stuff. So with that, I'm going to introduce everybody to Electricity 101. Why are we going to talk about electricity, you ask? Well, understanding some of the electrical basics will actually help you understand batteries a little bit more, as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about energy. So don't worry, we're not going to get into physics or chemistry or really complex math here, but there are some common terms we think that everybody should be aware of, because having a common language and understanding will really be important as you start to think through this process. So let's kick it off here with watts. Watts is really important. What is a watt, you might ask? In basic terms, watts is a unit of power. So the more watts you have, the more power you have. So I liken it to your car's gas engine. The greater the horsepower your engine has, the more power that engine delivers, right? In addition to watts, there's volts, and then there's also amps. Everybody's familiar with volts, right? Because it's printed on every major manufacturer's battery, but amps is not. But just to give you a little bit of background, excuse me, volts are actually a unit of electrical potential, which is basically a fancy way of saying pressure. And amps is a measure of current, which is a fancy way of saying how much juice is flowing through the system. So, electricity is invisible, you might say, right? You can't see it, you can't touch it. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around. So what's a better way to try and visualize this, right? Because a lot of us, myself included, tend to be visual. Well, with that, I would say, let's think about water. Because if you can imagine water, then it might make things a little bit easier. So in those terms, voltage in this case would be analogous to pressure in a pipe or pressure in a hose. Current then would be analogous to, let's say, the size of the hose or the amount of water flowing through it. In this case, as it relates to electricity, that would be the amount of electrons flowing through from the battery to the tool. So what the heck does this all have to do with watts and power, you might ask? Well, because at the end of the day here, the really important equation to remember is that watts equals volts times amps. So you might also ask, well, if watts equals power, then what about the fuel capacity? How do we measure that? Talk about fuel capacity. A lot of people liken that to, the battery's, ability to do work. So going back to use your car engine as an example, your gas tank holds only so much fuel at a time, right? That fuel then becomes the energy that powers the engine in order for the car to drive. So how do we reimagine that in electrical terms to better understand your battery? Well, the answer is watt hours, which is basically the amount of electrical capability or capacity in the battery pack. So instead of gallons in the tank, it's energy in the pack. But wait, you might ask, isn't that the same thing as amp hours? Because that's the other thing that you see printed, loud and proud on every battery out there. And the answer is sort of. And this is where it gets a little interesting, because not all amp hours are created equally. So using our Ego 8 amp hour battery as an example, let's compare that to an 18-volt battery that also might be rated at 8 amp hours. So they might sound like they're the same because they're both 8 amp hours, but when you actually do that energy calculation of volts times amp hours equals watt hours, you'll find that the 60-volt battery has much greater energy capacity. So amp hours is really a good comparison of capacity only when the battery you're comparing is of the same voltage. So we'll talk a little bit about that more. But in other terms, you'll start to hear about, tends to be associated with larger, higher capacity batteries is the kilowatt hour. See, they're down in the lower right. And you see the conversion there. And really, that's just another fancy way of expressing watt hours for a much larger number. Do you think this is coming across okay, Barnaby? Because you know what, I don't want to get too technical here, and sometimes we can get really, really caught up in the weeds. But so far it makes sense, right?
Yeah, I flunked chemistry and I still understand. So let me ask you this. When people go shopping for batteries, and this is where it is so important, because my son still asks me this question, why do I need to know algebra? It's like, well, you really only need to know in life probably addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division. But so for us in talking about battery, it's going to be for the end user, all the folks that working out in the God's green acre, making it look pretty. They want to know, when they're choosing a battery, am I getting the most powerful battery when you talk about volts and amps and watt hours? So if you understand kind of the baseline of how this all works, we're going to take you to kind of educational nirvana and show you how things stack up, correct?
We are.
Yeah.
And that's a really good segue.
Yeah.
So what you see here is basically a quick reference listing for what we refer to as max and then nominal voltages for the most common brands out there in the market.
Mhm.
But what the heck does that mean, you might ask?
Right.
Well, max voltage it's basically the voltage of any battery pack when it's fully charged. But we all know that once you start to use it, that you're going to lose capacity. You're going to lose power. So that's actually not what lasts the duration of the use of the battery. So that's where we come up with the nominal voltage, which is what you see on the right side. So what the nominal voltage is, it's actually the average voltage of the battery pack as you start to deplete the battery further as it's being used down to a lower state of charge. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So you might say, why do some manufacturers choose to lean on one versus the other? Well, that has every bit to do with a little bit of history, and there's also some legal aspects to that. If we go way back in the early days of lithium ion, actually in Europe actually required manufacturers to report on the nominal voltage. But in the U.S., there's a little bit more gray area here as the technology evolved, certainly in the power tool world. So you used to see a lot of, or that's when you started to see a lot of max being used in voltage terminology, right? 56-volt max or 20-volt max for some of the newer platforms. So that's why you've seen some manufacturers start to do that. It's a little less confusing, and because it comes from the battery being at a full state of charge, it's just easier to express basically. So a little bit of trivia there for you.
Some people like to have the bigger number associated with their battery, right? It's like, hey, we're all that, but it's like start up and then run, right? Max is nominal.
Yep, and I'll be quick to kind of remind everybody too. It is easier because typically, the greater the voltage, right, as we mentioned earlier, the more power. Mm-hmm. And power is only part of the equation, right? Because then the ability to do the work that you're going to do for the period of time you want to do it, that's where it goes back to the watt hours. And so that's why we share the calculations and things like that. So
do you ever see a day, Nick, when the watt hours will be published?
So actually, it's already being done in many cases. You can actually turn a battery over, and for some manufacturers, including ourselves, the technical label will actually bear the watt hour rating on the battery itself. Typically, it's in really fine print, and the reason for that is because nobody's really taken the time to kind of equate that to why that's important, or how an end user could use that to their advantage. And that's why we're trying to change the dialogue. We're really trying to help people understand what watt hours are, number one, and why that's important, how that can ultimately be used to plan your day in terms of number of batteries you're going to need to get a certain job, or number of jobs done across a variety of different tools. So maybe, I guess, with that, it's probably worthwhile kind of running into more the calculation side, because this is the kind of thing that will be a great segue later in this presentation for a tool that we offer that does help you understand, it does help you calculate, or estimate, I should say, number of batteries and how long that will last, and how that basically factors into your overall initial investment as you're transitioning from gas to battery. So I guess to get into the nitty gritty a little bit, here's what you see here is the calculation for watt hours. And there's basically two ways to do this. You've got gross, and then you've got your rated watt hours. So using our, going back to our 8 amp hour battery as an example, you can see how we calculate for both of those. So in this top section here, gross watt hours becomes the max voltage times the amp hours. So as you saw on the previous slide, our max voltage is rated at 56 volts. And so this being an 8 amp hour battery, you do the multiplication and you get 448 gross watt hours. Okay. Where you'll see the max rating typically on the battery is going to be on the label, and then you'll also see that published in marketing materials, packaging, things like that. And that is what has driven the gross watt hour rating in the market, and that's because that's what shippers like UPS, FedEx, DHL as examples require for hazmat shipping purposes. Then there's what we call the rated or the nominal watt hours. And so for you guys landscapers to be able to make some calculations about how much usable energy is in the battery pack, this is what you use. So the rated watt hours, or the nominal, is actually calculated by taking the nominal voltage times the amp hours. So for the Ego 8 amp hour battery, our nominal voltage is 50.4 volts times 8 amp hours. Multiplication gets you 403 nominal watt hours of energy for that battery pack. Okay, so the main takeaway here, the bottom line here, is that the greater the watt hours for any given battery, the more work that battery can actually do. So why is it important? Because if you're using a lower voltage battery platform, so an 18 volt platform, a 20 volt platform, that just means that you'll need more of those batteries to accomplish the same kind of work that a 56 volt battery would require you to have. Okay, so while lower voltage batteries might be a little bit lighter, a little bit more compact, you're going to have to use more of them to accomplish the same kind of work. So that's really important to remember.
Yep. And so now, if we look at Ego specifically, 56 volts, that's kind of the middle of the pack. You got the 40 volts and you got lesser voltages, but not probably in the commercial realm. And then you go up to 60 and 80. Could it be, I think the assumption on the part of most people would be, well, 80 is going to be more powerful than a 56, but that's not necessarily so based on the calculations you've laid out.
It all depends, right? Because it goes back to then the capacity rating on the battery. Now, in general speak, yes, the higher the voltage, so an 80 amp hour, or I'm sorry, an 80 volt battery, right? On the whole, yes, it's going to be more powerful. But guess what? There's a penalty to that. The greater the voltage, or the more powerful the batteries are as you step up, an 80 volt battery is likely going to be bigger, and it's also going to be heavier, right? So it's about that trade-off too, right? You can have more power, but at what penalty, right? And you think about handheld products, right? Common handheld products like string trimmers, leaf blowers. The last thing you want usually, right, especially when you're working all day, is your biggest, heaviest battery hanging off the back end of that thing, because that's just going to, be more cumbersome on your wrists, on your forearms, things like that. So, we'll talk about this later, but that's why it's important as you're evaluating this. You want the right kind of power and performance, but you also want a battery that can be flexible across your line of equipment.
And then the third leg of the stool, certainly very important, according to the OPE article that I read again, it's the charging system. You got to have the ability to charge enough batteries to get through the day and have it done cost effectively, because there's going to be an acquisition cost of tools, and then you don't want to get killed on the back end by having to buy all these separate systems and rewiring and all that sort of thing. You want to make sure that everything functions within your budget to the best of its potential.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
very important. Sure.
And I guess before we get more into that piece, you know, I think it'd be great to have another poll question, because we get a lot of technical questions, obviously, in our world, and there's a lot of buzz around, you know, battery chemistries, battery technologies. So what you see here is another poll question: which of these cell technologies delivers more watt hours? Right? We just talked about watt hours. We talked about watt hours being kind of that energy component that allows you to get work done. So if you're not familiar with these technologies, don't feel too terribly bad, because a lot of this stuff is relatively new. But let's see what the audience thinks. You know, go ahead and think about this. Just as a quick recap, in case you haven't heard, pouch cells. What are those? Pouch cells are very thin, rectangular cells, like a thin wafer. Pretty much what you'd find in your cell phone. They have a number of benefits, like having a really high max discharge capability, or simply more power out. And they're also able to be charged faster. Tabless cells, on the other hand, have performance attributes that are similar to that pouch technology, but the biggest difference is their form factor. They're a cylindrical shape, just like standard, you know, lithium-ion cells out there today. And then there's, you know, good old-fashioned lithium-ion cells, which have been around for years and years and years, also cylindrical in size. So without getting into a lot of detail there, so their question here again is, which one of these delivers more watt hours, right? So, and again, watt hours being energy capacity. So take us another second and submit your answer. All right. So according to the polling community, it's the good old-fashioned lithium-ion cells that deliver the most energy capacity. So the answer here, it was kind of a trick question, because they're all about the same, believe it or not. I don't know what you rated or what you would have selected, Barnaby, but you know, essentially here's how it works. If you had a battery that was exactly the same size for all three of these different technologies, they're all going to deliver about the same amount of watt hours. In other words, similar, you know, amount of gas in the gas tank, right? Going back to your car. So it's the power difference, right? So capacity is one thing, that's energy. But it's the power difference. So you're going to have much higher power capability as you transition from good old lithium-ion cells to tablets and then into pouch. So that's hopefully a little bit better. That hopefully gives you a little bit better understanding of what that might mean. And there's a lot of other reasons why, you know, cost, you know, availability in the market, things like that drives manufacturers to use some of those. But looking forward in the future, you're going to start to see a lot more use of that tabless cell technology.
All right. Thanks a lot, Nick. And we're going to be getting back to you. Certainly, we're going to lean on you heavily when it comes to the Q&A. And I hope the Q&A is starting to load up with pertinent questions, because we've dumped a lot of good information into your brain. Now it's a question of you processing it and trying to figure out what's most important to get the answers to. But out of the classroom into the workspace we go with Amner De Leon of Blue Sky Green Earth Landscaping, who I found online seemed about a year ago or so. And I'm like, wait a minute, this dude is all battery power all the time, and he uses Ego. So I thought, I'm going to just call him and find out what's up and why he made the decision to do it battery only and then also Ego. So Amner, let's talk first and foremost about how you got into the commercial landscaping space. What were you doing at that moment where you just said, this is a good idea, I'm taking a swing at it, I'm going to go a different way?
Well, I was doing some consulting for traditional landscapers through pandemic and how they could become more efficient. And I saw the opportunity there one day when I was sitting in my backyard, and I saw my neighbor had his headphones on, and then he was mowing, and I didn't hear the lawnmower. So I thought maybe his music was too loud, and he didn't realize that he didn't have his mower on. So when I was walking over, and then I realized, oh no, he's actually cutting it, because I actually happened to be on a Teams call at that time, which is what we were all doing during pandemic. And then 2 and 2 came together at that point. Like, oh, there's a real market out there for landscaping, and especially with people being home. And then again, we've had this conversation. The more and more research that I've done. the more benefits there are to the end user, right?
Yeah. Now it's got to be hard though, because you're coming out of nowhere, right? And you're the dude that's just saying, "Hey, I'm going to go battery power," and everybody's like, "Wait a minute, is that going to do the same level of work? Is it?" I mean, because you're the business owner, you got to get the work done to get the pay. So, talk to me about your experience about educating not only the public about the benefits of battery power, but also your workforce, because you had to pluck people from elsewhere, right? And they were running gas, and then suddenly now they're in the battery world. So let's talk about the transition and how it all worked for you.
Yeah, that's actually funny. My background being Latino, we tend to be very proud and prideful of the big trailer and the biggest machine out there and the noisiest machine, right? So my friends were making fun of me, like, "Oh yeah, you're playing around with little toys," and it was one of those things that I would bring the truck over, and with the equipment that I had at that time, and I would just get guys to try out the machines. And as they started trying them out, like, "Oh, this is much easier to use," right? And that's how I started grabbing a couple of the employees, and then obviously explaining the benefits, the health benefits to them on using the electrical equipment.
Yeah, what are some of those benefits?
Well, first off, and this is what we always think about, is the hearing, right? Hearing, and then they're breathing in all this extra junk. So ears, lungs, and then the one thing that most people don't think about is the vibration, and the vibration and what it causes to their nervous system. So once I explain those things, they start to realize, oh yeah, this could harm me in the long run. And they're really taking to it. They're actually starting to go back, because I still borrow from my friends, the traditional landscapers. I still borrow when we have to scale up, and then they go back and they start talking to them about, hey, I was using this thing, and then a couple of times my friends call me over and they want to check out whatever I'm using at that point, and then I'll bring it over.
Well, and so getting back to your analogy of, the perception, I should say, of people thinking that battery power is not as powerful as the gas that they're used to. Let's talk about your experience with that using Ego.
I don't have any issues as far as power being able to use it, especially on the commercial end. Sometimes it's a little bit too powerful, and when we've been out doing demos, just the string trimmer, for example, it's very powerful. I actually have to lower the speed on it in order to be able to work, especially if I'm training one of the new guys, and it's like, no, you just can't go full speed because you're used to going full speed.
Right. By full speed, you mean there's a couple of gear settings there, right? So you can still squeeze the trigger all the way and get maximum for the gear that you're in, but you drop it from 3 to 1 usually, just because it just does the job of gas, but at a lower setting.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
So now the big question, because Nick laid this out for us perfectly, about how it is that you got to figure out the calculations about the power you're going to need to get through the day. We've got the charging system, but I mean, you're going to have to transition, for everybody probably watching this webinar. You're going to be coming from gas and going into battery power. Not an easy transition to wrap your head around, but let's talk about the nuts and bolts of it. Let's say you're just going to operate one trailer of battery power just to get your toe in the water to see how it all works for you. Keep using your gas, but experiment with battery power. Let's talk about the cost of that in your mind, Amner. What did it cost you to outfit a complete trailer, and how did that kind of contrast with your fuel costs of having to fuel up gas every time you roll out of the shop? So dollars and cents time.
Right. When we're talking just the commercial end, right? When it comes to batteries and chargers and the basics, you're talking about $8,000 if you're starting off, and then you got to start looking at your fuel cost. And Nick actually mentioned this. When you're looking at your fuel costs, you're thinking, oh my God, $8,000. And as you continue to grow, you're going to have to buy batteries. And then we'll talk a little bit about the growth that we've had. But once you get started with that, you start offering to clients, you'll notice that you're going to start gaining clients. You'll have to start adding batteries. And this is actually the problem that I did run at the beginning. When I was growing, my target was 25 properties at the beginning and charging. And that's actually when the GPX came along. Had I not had the GPX, I would not have been able to grow the business at the pace and at the amount of properties that we can service now.
Okay, so deliver the big headline here, the one that jaws were dropping with the people we were presenting to who were landscapers. They're like, yeah, so you're going to offer battery power, probably get a couple clients out of that. In a year and a half's time, you went from nothing to how many clients?
So we haven't done any marketing, and the target was 25 properties, like I told you last year.
Right.
25 break me even with the initial investment, and I would be happy with that. So we ended last year with 70 properties. And right now I just put a freeze on the amount of properties that we have, because we are growing a little bit faster than expected. We're currently sitting at 140, and this is not doing any marketing. So it's been a lot of word of mouth, and then the moms on Facebook and people sharing our information. That's how we're getting the calls. There's been a couple times that we've been together, and you've seen where either I'm getting calls, texts, or emails that they heard about our service, and that's how we're growing now. Nick actually talked about the power on the go, and normally that would be something that at the stage that I'm at, I'm thinking I have enough batteries for the properties and my plan for the day. But what tends to happen, and it has happened quite a few times, where I'll get one client asking, hey, can you service my property? And like all of a sudden, like today, like they're next door. And obviously for efficiency purposes, that's what we want. We want to be close together and take care of the properties. That's where that charger comes into play for me, because I already planned out my day for the batteries. And now all of a sudden I need to service an additional property. Pop the batteries in there, and then we have additional power to go.
Into the power bank, yeah. So I guess I'm going to run an unofficial poll question. Nobody needs to click any tabs, but how many of the landscapers or business owners that are watching this webinar right now have had Amner's experience where the phone is ringing off the hook with people saying, hey, come and cut my lawn? I mean, during the course of presentations, you'd have to excuse yourself 2 or 3 times on any given day I was with you to take the phone calls from people saying, I want you to cut my lawn. Usually I think it's the other way around, where it's mailers knocking, trying to cajole people, hey, come with me. But people are coming to you in droves. And last question for you, Amner, what about the cost of, what do you charge a customer versus say gas versus battery? Is it more expensive to have a battery powered crew come through and cut a lawn?
Well, part of what I do is I match pricing. One of the last things that you want to do when you're going out to get clients is go down and have that race to the bottom on pricing, right? Just so that you can make a name for yourself, and we don't do that. So we match, especially if they currently have a landscaper. If they don't, then we have our pricing, which the pricing, it's about $5 more if you really wanted to go there. Because that's just the economics that need to be there for paying employees. But as far as running the company, it's a lot cheaper, because we don't have the gas, the belts, the oil, just the maintenance. On the maintenance side, you save a lot of money. So that, and then, and we've joked about this, the people don't account for the Slurpee time, right? You got to go by the gas station, and you got to stop at the gas station, and all of a sudden the guys have to go get their Slurpee, and got 2 or 3 guys. Instead of a 5-10 minute gas stop, then they have to go to the bathroom and all this, and now you're spending a half hour, even 45 minutes of downtime, and this is what we're talking about, downtime, right? So you save that on the payroll end. So it's actually a lot more cost effective to run it this way.
Right. And lastly, I will say that I was reading another article where they were saying that people that converted wholesale to battery, they sadly had to let their mechanic go because the mechanic was doing so much work consistently to keep the machines running. But, and we're going to get with Nick on this one because he knows all about these tools. There's very little that needs to be done to maintain these tools, short of just lubrication, if there is any lubrication on maybe a ZTR, and just basic things that are easily maintained. But Amner, would you recommend that people at least get one trailer to try it out and see how it all fits?
Absolutely. And if you're in New Jersey and you want me to come and show you, I'll come and show you.
You demand, man. All right, Professor Nick. A lot of people now are probably thinking, I had no idea that there was money to be made going battery power, because if you're different, then you stand out, right? If you're not just another gas blow and go crew, but somebody who is quiet, no emissions. I mean, think of schools, hospitals, business parks. I know of a guy that he had to pay premium because the business parks, they don't want the gas crews coming around during business hours because business cannot be conducted on the phone when there's loud machinery outside the window. And so he would have to have crews show up at 6 o'clock at night or at 5:30 in the morning, get the work done. Now you can just do it whenever. So Nick, take us through the process of what people need to be thinking about in order to navigate the transition from gas to cordless.
Yeah, it's oftentimes the very first question that we get is, how do I start to do this, right? What are the right questions I should ask, and where do I go to ask those questions? It can very quickly become a very overwhelming kind of a feeling as you think about going from an entire line of gas products to battery and all the unknowns related to that. So we felt it would be a little more fair to actually talk through some of the tips that we think that benefit or could benefit professional landscapers, because there is so much that goes into it, right? So we've kind of outlined a couple of the key questions that we've gotten, and we're gonna give you some things to consider. So first and foremost, do I need to upgrade or change the vehicles I'm using or the trailers that I have? And so I'll break this down because there's a few things to consider here. For example, number one is weather, right? Are the products that you're considering rated for outdoor storage? Not every manufacturer rates their products for weather resistance, right? So that's important to understand. As we all know, the better that those tools excuse me, are protected when they're not in use, the longer they're going to last, right? So even with some gas products, if you leave them out in the rain all the time, eventually they're going to start to rust, as an example. But this is a key component. So understand the durability factor. Some brands out there market that very heavily, others do not. But weather is an important factor to consider. Guys are rolling around in not just closed trailers, but open trailers, right? So susceptible to all the elements.
Now, is there a rating on weatherproofedness or hardiness?
Yeah, you'll see what's called an IP rating or an IPX rating, and typically the higher that number is, the more resistant, I guess I should say, that particular tool or item is to moisture, water, dust, all kinds of things that, like, if it gets down into the deep cracks of the product or into the electronics, like, you could start to experience things that go wrong, right? And that's what we want to stay away from. So where you see, or you should, one, pay attention to that, and two, where you see those higher weather resistance ratings, that just is a little bit more peace of mind to say that these products will stand up better in work that's being done under the elements, right?
Yes, I'm a big fan of examples. So using Ego's commercial tools, which are IPX5, what does that mean using your water in a hose example?
So what we tell customers is, feel free to use our products in the rain. It's that simple. What we tell people to stay away from is, don't let the products sit out in the rain for an extended period of time. Don't submerge your products in water, for example. And definitely, if it's pretty customary for landscapers who have ZTRs, large mowers, things like that. They'll maybe tackle that the cleaning process with a pressure washer. You got to be careful with that, because pressure washer, with all that pressure behind the water, that water could find itself in places where you don't want it to go. So we generally discourage users from using pressure washer to really do a deep, thorough clean on battery product, and that's pretty customary for most battery products. So that's, as a general rule of thumb, what we encourage.
Okay, cool. So what about charging?
Yeah, so charging. So another important aspect to consider if you're thinking about what you might need for your vehicle or your trailer. So if you're currently operating only with open trailers or pickup trucks, maybe start to imagine at some point in time investing in a trailer or a van, and whether or not you'll be charging on that truck or trailer or vehicle versus inside a building, which is actually a really great segue into the third point here, which is security. And this is something that we actually don't hear too much about, because unlike the battery world, in the gas world, there's not a lot of things like small elements, tools, that have a really high value. So theft deterrence is not usually one of the things that landscapers are too concerned about. However, this is going to be a challenge, as you can probably imagine, because some crews will require quite a few batteries on those trailers. And for those of you who've already begun your process or have already started to invest in battery, those batteries can get pretty expensive and even more expensive to replace. So if you can find ways to manage your charging on a vehicle or on a trailer overnight that can then be closed up, then that can be less of a hassle, because now you've got extra protection.
And I think too, I know on our power bank, which is the remote charging solution, those have locks on them, right? So you can't pull the batteries off because they've been locked on.
Yeah, we've designed our PGX system so anywhere you can stick a battery, insert a battery where it's being charged. So on all of our anything that has a charge port, you can lock it down. We've got integrated locking mechanisms so that landscapers can do just that. They can protect their investment if they're walking away from the trailer. Right, a lot of times guys will leave the trailers wide open as they're moving around doing the work. So again, is a little bit more peace of mind. We've enabled our charging solution with integrated locking mechanisms to protect against that, or to help mitigate against that. So really here the biggest takeaway is that enclosed trailers or vans, vehicles that you can close up, lock up, whatever, they'll help you protect against the weather. It also helps improving your charging workflows, as well as offer the best security.
Cool.
Next big thing that we tend to hear a lot about is, how the heck do I make sure that my crews don't run out of power, right? Historically, end users, landscapers, right? They're used to knowing like how much gas they're gonna have to carry around to fuel their crews during the day. And in some cases, like Amner was talking about, you got to stop midday, you got to go to the gas station for your slurpee break, and you're hanging around waiting to refuel. So when we think through this, we really kind of break it down into 3 steps in terms of how we explain landscapers being able to calculate their power. Number 1, make a list of the equipment that you'd want to convert from your gas to battery, and basically start with the tools that you're already using. If you're not necessarily using brush cutter or straight shaft edger, whatever, don't even consider those. Just think about the things that you're using today. Make a list. From there, what you do, think about the batteries. And so this is where you'll have to do a little bit more investigation. You'll find that different manufacturers publish things like runtime guides and other online calculator tools. Use those tools, as well as the information we've shared here today, to help you with calculating watt hours, right? Again, we calculated watt hours earlier being voltage times the amp hours, because that's then going to be the energy. Understanding the energy you're going to need to be able to run those products through the day is what's going to help you figure out how to transition that much faster.
But thankfully, because I know a lot of people are thinking, oh my God, I didn't really pay attention to that part of the program. How am I going to calculate all these things? We've got an app for that, correct?
There is an app for that, Barnaby. I'm glad you brought that up. We'll touch on that in just a second. But before we do, I just wanted to cover the last piece, because the charging piece really is probably one of the most important aspects of your entire battery platform. Mm-hmm. And so basically, how and where and when you charge is going to become super critical for any professional landscaper. While it may not be completely obvious to everybody, you're really going to want to consider a charge port for every battery. That's how we would break it down in a perfect world. Ideally, you'd want to also do most of your charging overnight. Take advantage of the downtime you have in between work days. It doesn't take away from the work that you're doing during the day from your customers. And as I mentioned way early on, charging overnight at night is when you can take advantage of a lower electrical cost, typically, right? Cost per kilowatt hour. Charging during the day may be required in some cases. We recognize it. It's why we developed the PGX power bank, so you could charge during the day. So that may be required in some cases, especially during times when energy demand is higher. Like think about here in the Midwest, right? We get a lot of leaf cover starting in the month of September and October. So it's heavy leaf cleanup season. So during leaf season, we're going to be doing a lot of leaf, or using a lot of leaf blowers to manage your leaf piles and so forth, or maybe you're using ZTRs or walk behind mowers to basically mulch those leaves. You're probably going to burn through a few extra batteries. So those are the things that you want to kind of think through and plan for. So with that said, plan for the worst case energy scenario. So think about, there's going to be your average day to day, and then there's going to be those peak time ups. So always plan for a little bit of a buffer. We always like to say plan for 20%, just as a general rule of thumb, because at the end of the day, it's all about maximizing that uptime, right?
All right. And so I'm going to flip it back to Amner just really quickly on the fall cleanup question, because I see on a lot of forums that people say, I cannot imagine doing all the work I need to get done in the fall using battery power. And yet, Amner, you've been doing this now through the fall in New Jersey, where the leaves can be the size of dinner plates. So you're moving a lot of material. Talk about your experience and how battery has worked in the fall for you.
Yeah, but don't forget, the leaves are bigger in Texas, because I've gotten that one before.
Yeah.
But no, actually, as long as you have enough battery power, you're able to do it. Because the sun goes down early, so 2 to 3 cleanups a day, easy, depending on the schedule. At the beginning, I thought, okay, this is going to be a little bit harder. But again, going back to the PGX, because in the early spring, I was thinking last year, how are we going to do this if we're going to need more batteries, and how am I going to charge? So yeah, thinking about, one charging bay per battery is really good. And overnight, absolutely, charge overnight. It will help you maximize your downtime.
But you can get through the day just using the existing batteries that you have, because you're not using your ZTR as much, right? It's during fall.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And I think I missed that part when we originally spoke, because the reason that I went with Ego before I even met all of you was because of the battery platform and the ability to switch those batteries from one to another. So in the fall, we're not mowing, so those batteries from the ZTR go into the blower, which we know the blowers do take a lot more power. So I have those batteries that I can repurpose. I call it repurposing them. So those batteries do get used the whole year.
Okay. And so now it's going to ease the pain of a lot of people as far as calculating the cost of transition, how many batteries you'll need. And just to make it simple for you, we've got the app for that, right, Nick?
We do, and listening to Amner, his situation is not unique. There's a lot of landscapers that really struggle with trying to figure out how to plan for the right batteries, number of batteries, and things like that. And that, again, as I mentioned before, tends to be one of the first questions we get next to where do I begin with all this, right? The second then is how the heck do I manage my power? How many batteries do I plan for? And so with that led us to develop a tool that is now available. So you see the URL there in the middle of the screen. Our Power Manager, so the Ego Power Manager solution. It's a web-based tool that's also designed to be mobile friendly, but it's a tool that we offer. And the way that it works is this, right? So you're thinking about transitioning from gas to battery. You don't know where to begin, but you want to start looking into it, and you understand your business, right? So the way that it works is this: you answer a few basic questions up front about your crews, the size, how they operate, and then you go through an equipment selection process, for the equipment that you want to operate. You can then choose from a recommended set of batteries that's provided through the tool, or you can even modify that at your will. But the point is, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of you. And the way that works is, we have so much data, right, over years and years of testing. So we know on average how much energy it's going to take to run a string trimmer, for example, for 30 minutes, or we know how much energy it's going to take on average to power a walk behind mower for an hour. So with all those data points, they feed this tool, and that's ultimately what helps build this composition of tools plus number of batteries, size of batteries, things like that, based on how the landscaper is using. It's really, really great. So then, based on the recommended batteries that the tool gives you, it will recommend the number of charging solutions that you'll need to get the job done in order for being ready for the next workday. You can save the quoted list of products and share with your local dealer, where you can then discuss, terms of purchase, learn about any available discounts or deals, things like that. It's a tool that we launched earlier this year, and we continue to build on it, make improvements. But it's a really great way to start when so often many landscapers realize that they just don't know where to start or the questions to ask. So check it out. And as a quick pro tip. As you begin to consider different battery systems, whether it's eco-commercial or something else, be sure to consider how you might want to move energy from ZTRs to handheld battery equipment. This is probably, it probably only applies to anyone currently considering battery ZTRs today, but think about the future, because in the next 3 to 5 years, you may by choice or possibly by force have to make a move to a cordless ZTR. So you're going to want to have invested in a platform that lets you move that energy around. So that you can handle those spikes in power demand. I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because we are coming up on the end, and we want to make sure that we have time for Q&A. But basically, there's three ways to think about batteries as it relates to ZTRs. You've got plug-in ZTRs. This is probably one of the most obvious ways, meaning you charge your ZTR by plugging in a cable. These tend to be the most expensive out there, and they're not very flexible because that battery is dedicated, and oftentimes you don't even end up being able to use the full battery, so you're left with a lot of battery energy at the end. That's why an option to consider is removable batteries. In a ZTR kind of an aspect, because by having to use tools and things, it gets more complicated. ZTR batteries used in the power bank for DC-DC charging makes it a little bit nicer, more versatile. Removable batteries in the ZTR tends to be the most flexible commercial option for landscapers out there. And so whether you at the last Equip show or you're planning to attend this year's Equip show, you'll see that Eco-Commercial actually operates this way. Our commercial ZTRs actually utilize removable batteries. And that's just for a number of reasons, the least of which is convenience and economics. The last one there is swappable batteries. This is what you'd find in Ego products or even like Toro or Greenworks on the residential side. It's where you can use the batteries used in your handheld tools, or you can swap them and put them in your ZTR. Now, while it does give you a lot of flexibility, it's really only geared towards more homeowners, since they don't typically need nearly as much energy capacity to get the job done. Not unless they've got a big property and they're having to swap those out 3, 4, 5 times a day. So the big takeaway here is that swappable batteries are the least flexible for commercial. So the most flexible option is going to be the removable battery option. So keep that in mind as you're investigating a battery operated ZTR. I think with that, we'll go to a little Q&A.
Yeah, let's see what's on everybody's mind.
Yeah, thanks. What features, I wonder, make these PGX, part of this PGX system? What makes it commercial grade? Is it different than the batteries and the systems that a residential user might buy at Ace Hardware or at another spot?
So the way I would answer that is the PGX system is really, so again, going back to the mantra of this whole story, right? Maximizing uptime, right? Keeping the professional landscaper as efficient as possible. So the PGX system, unlike using other chargers, even if you want to consider the Ego standard chargers, it's a more scalable solution, it's a more flexible solution, and it's a more economical solution, meaning on a per charge port basis, it's going to be significantly more cost effective to have 3 port docks, connected together in series than if you were to try and even attempt to have lots of individual chargers. Because again, going back to circuits and circuit breakers and maximizing your electrical infrastructure, you're going to find out pretty quickly that trying to plug in lots of different individual chargers is going to overload your system. So scalability, flexibility, and economics are kind of what really drives the value proposition for Ego PGX.
And when, Nick, when will PGX launch? When is this coming out?
It's available today.
It's out. I love it. Okay. The commercial versus homeowner question is always interesting to me. You know, people have said the lawnmower doesn't know if the lawn is a commercial lawn or a homeowner lawn, right? It's just grass. But so I mean, a homeowner, if he's got a big property, could buy this PGX system and use it as well, and have a bank of chargers in the garage.
That's true. Yeah. You know, there's more advantages than what we present as being advantages to the commercial user, that could provide equal benefit to a residential user. So we don't discourage people from buying, you know, our commercial charging system if they just want to set up in their garage at home, for reasons that may be related to just the simple fact that you can mount it to the wall, as opposed to having to find space on a counter or a shelf, you know, to have a number of chargers. Many homeowners could also realize some of the benefits from the Ego PGX charging system.
Great. We've got a question from Brett here. How many charges do you get from a battery before they go bad? How long do these batteries last? Do they talk about cycles or?
Really great question. And this is something that really nobody talks about, because it gets complicated. But in general speak, when we talk about cycle life, 2,000 to 3,000 cycles before you get to 80% of the original capacity is what we tell people. So lithium-ion batteries, and I can only speak for ours because we've done far more testing in that regard. But you know, the batteries will actually last well beyond that 2,000 to 3,000 cycles. All it means is that over time you're going to see a degradation in the amount of runtime that you're going to get, right? Because over time you're losing some of that capacity, because that's a trade-off for use over an extended period of time. So that's how I would answer that question. Other manufacturers, right? It's going to kind of depend on how they've constructed the battery, the cells that they've selected, how the tool is being used. There's a number of variables that go into it, but as it relates to Ego, that's what we would say.
And can you talk a little bit about heat management? There are a wide range of battery manufacturers and quality and trust kind of thing, or reliability, but how do you manage heat in these chargers for my shop, in my garage, or on my trailer?
Yeah, it may not be completely obvious to everybody, but heat is the number one enemy to basically any battery, right? So the more you can help dissipate heat or pull heat away from the battery, basically the longer it's going to last. So you'll find that a lot of chargers today, and this goes for many manufacturers, you're going to see integrated cooling, and that's because the way that they've designed their batteries really requires more of a forced air cooling to get the battery down to a certain temperature in order for it to be able to charge better. With Ego, we actually designed our battery originally with that in mind, meaning the way that our arc-shaped battery is designed to kind of self-dissipate that heat, so that while it's in use or even during charging, it has the ability to dissipate heat just by its design. So, but I guess to get back to the original question, managing heat could be done in a number of ways. You know, when you think about charging installations that might be in a closed trailer, for example, you know, think about adding some exhaust ventilation in the ceiling or in the roof, or even in the sides of the trailer, to allow for a little bit of airflow during the day. Or you can invest in, you know, there's 12-volt powered fan options that you can install it in the walls or in the roof, and then simply run an electrical connection to your vehicle, plug it into your cigarette lighter or whatever, to allow a little bit more forced air movement through the trailer. So anything you can do in a closed or an open environment just to promote better airflow is just going to be better, more efficient for your battery. For all of our standard chargers on the residential side, we've got forced air cooling, so you've got a fan that's really blowing air through. In the case of our commercial system, we use we designed it differently, but that's because the user operates differently, right? You're going to use up a battery, and then you're going to go and put that battery on the charger, and especially in most cases during the day, because you've already pre-planned for your energy use, you're not going to be requiring the battery to actually charge during the day because you've got another battery ready to go. So by the time you get back at the end of the day and basically enable the charging for your trailer, the batteries will be at the right temperature, and you won't have to worry about that. So it's kind of a loaded question because it depends on the situation and the setup. But rule of thumb really is the better you can promote airflow. As an example, it's gonna have big benefits overall.
I want to throw one more question out and just talk about cost briefly. These commercial systems, how does the cost compare to standard chargers? I have to buy the hub and then the charging kit, but can you talk just briefly about cost? I know we're over time a little bit, but.
What I would say, cost is going to be different depending on where your location, the dealer you're using. So that's a great question for your dealer. We've trained our dealers to have that conversation in a consultative kind of way. So again, pricing is going to be different depending on who you are and where you're buying from and things like that. So I would recommend you talk to your dealer about that.
Great. Thanks. That's a lot of good information. Really appreciate the time. Really appreciate the learning. Nick, great to hear from you. Amner, wonderful. Congrats on the success of your business. What a cool story. And I know you and I are going to talk again soon, so I look forward to that. Barnaby, good to see you again. I really want to thank the Ego Commercial team for filling us in on the PGX charging solutions. This PGX Commercial looks like a pretty solid opportunity, and glad we could hear from a pro user to talk about it. Thanks everyone for joining us, and I hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Yep. Bye-bye.